Standard geopolitical analysis focuses on oil prices and maritime borders. However, the rhetoric surrounding Iran today reveals a much older collision of faith. Look at what the opposition is saying out loud. High-ranking politicians in the West are openly declaring this a crusade, a term traditionally used to describe a religiously motivated military campaign. Consider incoming U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He has literal crusader rhetoric tattooed on his body, including the word infidel for non-believers. This religious framing is a staple for U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who uses aggressive, faith-based language to justify Middle Eastern military policy. This ideology even enters the White House, where executive power pairs with Abrahamic prayers, ceremonies creating a theological union around modern conflicts. On a second front, the conflict turns cultural. Across Europe, high-end fashion shows have begun adopting overtly satanic imagery, parading models with fake blood on their hands. The third front is strictly territorial, centered on the theological ambition of Greater Israel. This movement seeks to establish a state where non-Jews, whom they refer to as Goyim, are viewed as a servant class. This map follows a scriptural interpretation of Genesis, claiming a divine right to land stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Realizing these borders today requires absorbing Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Kuwait, while annexing major portions of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. The instability currently spreading across the region mirrors the exact expansion required to turn this ancient, prophecy-driven map into a reality. To understand the origins of this plan, we look back to the year 1299 and the birth of the Ottoman Empire. For 600 years, the Ottoman Caliphate acted as the primary Islamic political power. It maintained a unified state across 3 continents, holding the region together under a single authority. In 1897, Theodor Herzl convened the First Zionist Congress in Switzerland, marking a shift toward organized territorial ambition. Herzl argued that the Jewish people, who had been scattered globally for 2,000 years, required a sovereign sanctuary in Palestine. Herzl first tried to buy the land. He approached Caliph Abdul Hamid II and offered to pay off the Ottoman Empire's massive national debts in exchange for control over Palestine. The Caliph refused. He replied that the land belonged to the Muslim community who had bled for it, and it could not be sold for any amount of gold. This refusal changed everything. The movement realized that as long as the unified caliphate stood, their territorial goals would remain blocked. The empire had to be dismantled from within. By 1908, a rebellion called the Young Turk Movement began fracturing the empire. They were heavily influenced by the Donme, a group that publicly followed Islam while secretly maintaining distinct religious and political agendas. This internal subversion led to the Sultan being deposed in 1909. In less than a decade, the 600-year-old empire collapsed completely under the weight of World War I. In 1916, while the war was still being fought, British diplomat Mark Sykes and French diplomat François-Georges-Picot met in secret to divide the spoils. These diplomats ignored the actual populations of the Middle East. They rolled out a map of the unified empire and used a ruler to carve it into artificial, straight-lined territories. The Ottoman Caliphate survived centuries of external military pressure. Ultimately, internal subversion and secret treaties proved more lethal than any invading army. By 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. It was a formal promise to support the creation of a Jewish national home in Palestine. The letter was addressed specifically to Lord Walter Rothschild, the head of the Zionist Federation. This financial dynasty acted as the primary backers for the movement, using their vast banking influence to lobby world governments. History shows this family banking network funding world powers, from the British to the Americans, and today even the Bank of China, to advance their long-term geopolitical interests. The resulting map divided the region into small, hostile pieces. These borders were designed to ensure that the people of the Middle East would be too focused on internal conflict to ever resist a foreign agenda again. The contemporary friction on these 3 global fronts reflects the long-term momentum of that Balfour era. We are witnessing the final territorial shifts of a map designed over a century ago to fulfill a specific theological vision.